Hello, everybody. I'm here with Jim Corley, who's originally, I believe, from Leitrim. Is that right, Jim?
Yes, yes.
And he's now been living in Blessington for over 55 years, approximately. So, Jim is going to tell us some of the history of the area. And without further ado, nobody wants to be listening to me. I'll pass you over to Jim.
Fáilte Rotas Jock, you're welcome. And today I'm going to talk about Elizabeth Smith of Ballyboys, Blessington. Now, why am I picking Elizabeth Smith particularly? Well, she wrote a lot of diaries from the years 1840 to 1885, and they're to do with her estate in Ballyboys, and of course it covers the famine years. And she was a great writer, very witty, very sharp at times, but she's worth reading. She's a great author. Now, she was born in Edinburgh in 1797 and lived in a place called Rothiemurcus. Now, I've titled this talk From Bombay to Ballyboys. In fact, I've done I have it on my website, an article on my website. Now, how did she get from India to India from Edinburgh? Well, it's a long story. Her father was Sir John Peter Grant, who inherited a very large estate in Rothiemurcus, very well timbered. And there was a great industry in the timber, and it would be felled and then lopped and floated down. The logs would be floated down to the sawmills, where it was cut into planks for commercial use. Now, her father, if he had kept track of his estate and minded it, he would have had a very good life. But he got involved in the law, and he practiced as a barrister in Edinburgh for some years. Now, I'd say, he ran into debt, to put it quickly, and he had to flee the country, because that time, if you were in debt, you could be put into a debtor's prison if you couldn't meet your debt. So it was pretty serious. So he had to get out of England and Scotland and head for India, where he was offered a judgeship. Now, so the family went with them. That's how they were in India. A few of Elizabeth's experiences up until 1829, when she married Colonel Henry Smith. Her father had a big library in Rothiemurcus, and he asked her to catalogue it, but she couldn't leave. When she got a book with a title that she was interested, she couldn't leave it down, and she would keep reading it, and the cataloguing sort of was forgotten about. She also kept the whiskey. They had a distillery there, and she was the one in charge of it, and she was very efficient. Now, whiskey was very important to the workmen there, because when they came in the morning for the breakfast, they would get a dram of whiskey with bread and cheese or whatever, and at lunchtime the same, and going home the same. Whiskey was drunk the same as we would drink tea, and of course it was cheaper. She wrote articles for Chambers Penny Journal, she and her sister, and they were published. So from a very young age she was writing and having her works published. She spent a year in Oxford with her aunt, who was married to an Oxford Don. So that was a great experience. She received private tuition, of course, and she got dancing classes and music classes. She was a great musician, very fond of music, good singer, played the piano. As many people did in those days, they had to entertain themselves. Now, check the year 1829, she was now in India, cut off from her past, and she was unmarried, and she was living with her father and mother. So luckily along came the Colonel, and they decided that they'd get married. Now, she wasn't a great catch in the marriage stakes, because she had no dowry, which was very important for girls in those days. And she was on the shelf, because at 32 years of age, she was old in regard to married. Girls married that time at 17 and 18. That's why they had so many children. Now, he wasn't a great catch either, even though he had a lot of money. He worked for the East India Company. So they were a very wealthy organisation.
It sounds like, Jim, they were in love.
It certainly wasn't love at first sight. But she decided, and I suppose he went along with it, that they would get married and make the best of it. And they did. And they lived, both of them lived to a ripe old age, and they had 4 children. But I get back to Henry not being a great catch, because he was on the brink of dying from asthma. And the climate in India didn't suit him. Anyway, they got married in Bombay, which is now, of course, Mumbai, in the cathedral there in 1829. Now, I happen to have, before they got married, of course, the gentry that time made out a settlement. And I actually have the marriage settlement here, and I can show it to you. This is a box that I got made for it and other documents. And it was done by a man called Des Green in Marley Park. And I think he did a very nice...
Very nice, yeah. Marriage settlement, Bombay to Baltic Boys.
Can you read it?
I can, yeah.
1829. Now that was normal, that they would have a settlement. Now this is I'll show it to you here. It's parchment, of course.
Yes.
And it's I won't open it out, but it's very
old.
It's very old and very
Fragile.
very big, large pages. And one of the conditions were that she would never own his property, but she would get an annuity of 230 from the estate. Because, I should say that at this stage, Henry actually owned Balti-Boys, because his brother had died in Paris.
So that's the Blessington connection.
This is the Blessington connection, yeah. And one of the conditions was that if Henry died in Bombay, she would be given 8,000 rupees out of the Blessington estate, so that she could have come back to England in style. She would also get any furniture or any plate. Now, plate meant, of course, silver, cutlery, and all sorts of stuff like that. She would get all that, and all the drinks, whatever drinks were in the house, like wine, brandy, all that sort of stuff. And there was arrangements made if they had any children in India, that they would get so much out of the estate. Now, as I said, word came a few weeks before they got married that the brother had died, and Henry was now the owner of Balti Boys. But um, Henry was now in a very bad way. He had done 30 years service with the East India Company, which is sort of the maximum you would do in a country where the climate wasn't suitable. It didn't suit the Europeans, and he had done his time, and his doctor told him if he stayed much longer in India that he would not survive. He just wouldn't. He couldn't survive the climate. So they decided to head back to Europe. In fact, back to Balti Boys.
Very good.
So they got hold of a ship anyway that was coming back. Now it was a tramp steamer in the sense that it was going to stop at various ports on the way back. And I got a map done by a local artist called Turlough O'Donnell. If you can get that, Paul.
I can, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. The voyage, Bombay, Portsmouth. And it shows the line around from India there, just above the ship, all the way around the Cape in South Africa, and up along to, looks like England, is it? Or
at St. Helena and then Ascension Island. But I just say something briefly about each of the stops. They departed from Bombay on the 4th of November 1829 for Ceylon. Ceylon is now called, of course, Sri Lanka, and they stopped at Colombo. Now, travelling gentry like that were very popular with whoever were the governors of these. There was a governor there of the island, and they were very popular because they would bring news and good company. So they partied long into the night and drank and told stories and played music and danced and so on and so forth. Now, there was another visitor there of interest, and his name was Sir Hudson Lowe. Now, he had been, when Napoleon, the great Napoleon, was incarcerated on the island of St. Helena, he had been the governor there and in charge of Napoleon. And he was given very strict instructions about how to manage Napoleon so that he wouldn't escape again. And he went by the book and was very hard on Napoleon. When the English people, strangely enough, got to know the way he treated Napoleon, they were enraged with him. And he actually got so much abuse that he decided he wanted to get away from England, and he landed. He couldn't be much further away than that. They stayed about 3 weeks there, and of course the captain of the ship had business to do. He had cargo to take on and so on. After that, they headed down for the Ile de France, or it was called after the Isle of France. It's now called Mauritius Island. It's a tourist area now.
Paradise. Tropical paradise.
Tropical paradise, yes. It's very popular with honeymooners now. And they reached that on Christmas Day, 1829. And they stayed there, no rush, stayed there for a month on that island. And a strange thing, slavery was practiced there, but it was a sort of a benevolent slavery. And one particular man that she talked to had been a slave, and he was freed. But he went back to his owner because he didn't see anything else much to do. That life was just as good as being a slave as being free. But they went on from there to the Cape of Good Hope. Now it was very cold at that stage, and the colonel was actually they thought he wouldn't survive. He was so bad. They had taken on, in India they had taken on a cow and a few goats, but they proved very poor milkers. I suppose whoever sold them these animals saw them coming, as the saying goes, and they got rid of them. They headed on then to St. Helena, and she describes there the tomb of Napoleon. Now I have it written here if I can find it. Just a brief. Oh yeah. Let's see, can I find it now? Oh yeah. The tomb was very saddening. After life's fitful fever, to see this stranger grave. In a hollow, a square iron railing on a low wall enclosed the stone trap entrance to a vault. Forget-me-nots were scattered all around, and the weeping willow drooped over the flag. The ocean filled the distance. It would have been better to have left him there, with the whole island for his monument. Now, when she wrote that in between 1830 and 1840, his body had been reinterred and brought back to Paris.
She paints a lovely picture.
She does, yeah. She's a beautiful writer, very descriptive. From there, they went on to Ascension Island. That's there. And there they took on 2 goats full of milk. And she's very confident that it was the milk of the goats that saved the asthmatic colonel's life. It's still regarded very highly, goat's milk. Now that was their last stop, and they had a long journey to Portsmouth in England. Now, from Portsmouth they made it back to Dublin, and eventually they headed down to Ballyboys.
To West Wicklow.
They're in West Wicklow now, and they would have gone, you know where the new cemetery is in Blessington now. Well, if you go down that road, keep going straight, you'll go back, you'll come down to the old cemetery, old Burgage Cemetery, and there's a little castle or a tower house there now. And it was there, the bridge then was, the Burgage Bridge was in a direct line across the lake. Of course, it's all flooded now, and the Burgage Bridge is knocked. There's no trace of it. So if you want to go over that way, you have to go around down the N81 and so on.
Otherwise you'll get your feet wet.
Otherwise you need a boat, Paul, to get across. Now, as they were going towards the house, they noticed the house was in very, very bad repair. Very, very bad. Nettles everywhere, disorder. And what looked like a band of beggars came towards them. And some local person said to her, "Oh, they're the tenants." She couldn't get over how badly dressed they were and how bedraggled they were and poverty-stricken. They were in a dreadful state. Now, why were they in such a bad state? Why were the tenants so bad and the place so well?
Would this be around the time of the famine?
This was before the famine.
Oh, right.
This was 29. But you could say that they were almost as bad as they were during the famine. They were in a very bad state. Well, the house and the estate had been neglected, I would say, from about 1780. From about 1780. The old owner, another John Smith, Mrs. Smith called him the Squire. he was one of the 18th century squires or landowners who lived a high life and didn't bother much about their estate. And he, when he was making his will in 1785, he willed money to so many people, his friends, his relations, £100 here, £100 there, an annuity to this one and that one. And you might say he was very generous. Of course he wasn't, because he was putting his estate in further debt. You know, it wasn't generosity. And when he died then in 1790, his will was probated the year after, and I have actually that as well here. I just show it to you. So this is the probate of his will.
From 1790.
It'd be 1791.
91,
Now maybe you can see it
yeah.
there.
Yeah, that's perfect. Probate, yeah. You
Yeah.
can't see the small print, but maybe you can explain that.
Well, yeah, I can tell you what it is. The last will and testament of John Smith, late of Ballyboys in the county of Wicklow, Esquire. And it's 1791.
Wow.
That's the probate.
It's an old document.
So it's an old document. It's a very interesting document. This is the document from which I got the knowledge about what he willed everybody. And it's very interesting that his two sons, Henry and John, they were actually illegitimate. And he had these sons with a lady called Jane Carney. Now, I haven't been able to find any record of Jane, only that there was a family living on the estate very close by called Carneys. And I think it's not unreasonable to think that she was from that house and that she went to work there maybe and that started a relationship. But he was afraid that they wouldn't inherit, but they did. Now, we'll get back to young John, who had inherited the estate in 1790 when the squire died. He was only a child, a young fellow at the time, and the estate was run by trustees. And when the 1798 rebellion came sometime later, John left Ballyboys, and the family think that it's because he was so traumatized by the terrible slaughter that was going on. But he never returned. So he left in 1798, he died in 1929 in Paris, never returned. Now, it's a puzzle as to why somebody would do that. And I have to ask the question, was he some way involved with the rebellion of 1798 and that he had to get out before he was imprisoned and perhaps even executed? I don't know. It's something. But while he was away in Paris, the estate was being run by other people, and you know, you need the owner to take an interest in things. Now, they would have been the agent would have been sending him money in Paris to keep him going. Now, I don't know how he spent his time or what he did or if anything worthwhile in Paris, but I do know he had a relationship with two ladies, and because he paid them £1,000 each. Henry did a few years later, and they were definitely living in Paris at the time.
And £1,000 at that time.
Well,
would have been
£1,000
huge.
was a lot of money. Again, that was coming from the estate. But Henry, luckily enough, Henry had a lot of money, and later on he decided to build the house and so on. That finishes the coming back to
From Bombay.
to they're now in Ballyboys. They can't live in the house, of course, because the roof is off and it's a ruin really. So they live in a small cottage beside Ballyboys, and they commenced then a few years later to get plans for a new building, and they commenced to the house. And I think I'll leave it there, Paul, for the moment.
Very good.
Part one.
Thank you, Jim.
Slow on that, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.